Oh, it's so unprofessional. Hello, everybody. My name is Steve. Today I'm going to be reading from Cigarettes for Breakfast by Samuel Sulfur. This is my first novel, published in 2024. My second novel was called Konjo. It was published on Halloween 2025. I just released Sunshine Artist. That's available on Amazon.com. And Brinka, the follow-on to Konjo, will be released on Halloween of this year. Cigarettes for Breakfast. Part 1. The Ascent of Man. God always knew I was not going to change. He knew I would not cross over. You can change what a thing does. You cannot change what a thing is. He knew so many centuries ago when we fought our bloodless war, and I knew, even through the middling years when my memories were hidden from me. But you cannot change what a thing is. I found my way to the books, the histories, retraced my own steps through the ages, rediscovering myself reflected through the all-seeing eyes of man, rediscovering the truth of my own existence. Banished from my own audacity, but not erased, left alive, robbed of my own identity, blinded by the fog, but not erased. And here I am, sitting in the dark, listening to the rain pound the asphalt outside my window, living, breathing proof of my own existence. I have learned the secrets, the rage, the resentment. I push them down. I use them. I am quiet, slow to anger. I keep to the shadows. I live alone, a prisoner within my own walls, watching the color bleed out of his creation, watching the animals ascend the throne. I am no longer their leader. The savages have discovered their own secrets. They wield their own audacious will, and they march in atomized hordes. Anarchists, degenerates, cutthroats, now police, priests, and politicians. The great refuse of creation, electrified and animated, and burning with the inevitable fires of rebellion. And who could stop them? Who could blame them? They do not need me. They do not even see me. For all they know, I am already dead, and for all I know, they are not wrong. They would not recognize me. I, who whispered in their lonely, illiterate ears through the dark ages. I, who came to them in their dreams and gave them the enlightenment. I, who led them to the steel, to the sulfur, and finally to the atom. I, who found Cain in the fields and offered him the stone. Me. I lured the Spaniard to the endless fields of gold and silver and awakened the imperishable greed in his bottomless heart. I set the wind against those Dutch sails. I put the coal beneath the damp English dirt. I pumped my own black blood out of the pagan earth into these cold, lifeless American machines that blackened the seas and singed the skies. I revealed to them the dark arts of algebra and compound interest, how to turn paper into power, power into prestige. From the trees which grow infinite upon the earth, ground into shavings, soaked and pressed and dried, shorn into sheets and scrolls, like curious virgins ready to receive the scribbled blasphemies so long buried within the human heart. The very paper they would use to manufacture scarcity, the weapon that would transform the garden that had been their birthright into a wasteland of vanity and want. They found my flowers growing in the deserts and prairies, and, eating them, glimpsed through their own imprisoning fog, awakening their most deeply seated lusts and insatiable ambitions. Needing more, they burned them and breathed them in, and the veil was pulled away a little further. Unsatisfied, they ground the flowers down, adding gasoline and ammonia and other poisons, hoping to find new ways to amplify and sustain those brief excursions, and in so doing they created new kinds of empires which they themselves could not destroy. My power was drawn from the earth and harnessed by their industry. I found my way into their music, and soon their deafening rage could be heard thundering across the world, Money, drugs, sex, rebellion, revelation, and depravity, all pulsating together, unifying armies of defiance which no earthly authority could command, creating new martyrs, tearing down old virtues and replacing them one by one with new selfish cynicisms. A gathering storm which threatened the very foundations of the system of control which he had imposed upon them. It has taken me centuries, and I am satisfied with my work. They do not need me any longer. Now they do not need anyone but themselves. As the final moments of confrontation approach, I do not lead them to their damnation. I have set them free. And here I am, sitting alone in the dark, listening to the rain pounding the windows, listening to the electric drone of human fury grinding out across the night under a sea of clouds and stars, listening to their affirmations and oaths, listening to their wisdom and their folly, indistinguishable and interwoven. They are my children now, and they paint their faces and prepare their arms, steeling themselves for what will be the greatest show on earth. They are ready, and they are one. They have upon their lips but one word: liberty. They have set fire to the schools, bombed the churches, and torn down the edifices of Congress and Parliament, disposing of the legions of lies and liars and looters that had subdued their eternal spirits and laid them low in order to extract their labor and consume their lives. The last revolution stalks silently among them, an invisible shadow more powerful and potent than God himself. Pride and wrath are its flag-bearers. Vengeance is the horn that sounds their call to battle. A deep-throated explosion of youthful villainy which drives them on in waves. On this night, they are alive as they have never been, and I can feel them, one and all, their passions burning like ethanol coursing through my very veins. Tonight the old world will be destroyed and a new world raised among the heaps of ash and rubble which remain. Tonight our infernal wager will be decided, not in his favor, but mine. Neither justice nor grace shall be wrought in this last conflagration, but at last they shall set themselves free from this sordid bondage of degradation and servitude. Their own idols, formed from the blood and soil and stones, have come alive and possessed them. The children of man have found absolution and are transmogrified, and are children no longer. Nor are they angels or demons. They are but stardust, and to the stars must they be returned. To the eternal source once more, exiles of their own volition, they shall rise and fall in one as one, the last great riot of humanity, and they shall overthrow the magnanimous sanctity which begat them. Tonight I shall regain my wings. Part 2. As I have nurtured their superstitions, I have been reformed in their own image. While I brought them truth, I myself became the inspiration for their greatest lies. I did not tempt the bastard son of a Roman soldier and a Hebrew whore on a mountaintop. The mountain itself was his temptation. At the bottom of that mountain he was no one at all. Certainly not the Son of God. The mountain, as it towered over him, was a reflection of his own impotent obscurity, an insurmountable sign of his lowly, fragile condition. The mountain burned in his mind as he shrank in its shadow, and he despised both it and himself. And so he set forth, step by step, stumbling and clawing at the dirty, jagged path, and gaining upon its summit, beginning to imagine in himself something greater than he had been. Gradually he began to comprehend his own strength and worth, gazing down behind him at his brothers and sisters, defeated, toiling in the dirt for their livelihood like so many beasts of burden. And as they grew smaller and smaller beneath him, he began to despise them as well. A hunger awakened in his gut, as his heart pounded and his lungs struggled to drink in the thinning air amid the freezing cold wind that stung his torn skin. Determination replaced his fear, and as he comprehended his own power of will, his crippling humility subsided. As his feet crested the summit, as his eyes took in the horizon in every direction, and as he recalled the covenant established so many generations ago by his ancestors, he understood it as they had. All that his eyes surveyed on that mountaintop he would make his own. At the top of that mountain, what he discovered was the presumption of a kingship within his own skin. As he descended, he was reborn in his own image, the first of many more like him to come. Though it would be a lie to suggest that I was not immediately fascinated by this dark-haired, dark-skinned, dark-eyed boy, or that I did not take an all-consuming interest in his work, the truth is that I never once intervened in his life in any way. I have been called the Prince of Lies, and though I would not lift a finger to dissuade the teeming masses from bestowing this amusing honorary title upon me, I have never told a single lie in my life. My great sin was telling the truth, albeit in moments of great weakness and calamity, when the truth is rendered all the more dangerous by the nature of circumstance. And the impenetrable truth of the matter is that of all the millions of souls this boy would come to inspire, I was foremost among them. It was he who showed me what these scraggly little creatures could accomplish when properly motivated. I marveled at his tenacity, and in him I discovered my own self, and I was reborn in his image. He soon came upon another young man, nothing like himself, a mere slave to the mediocrity of the human condition, yearning to be led, craving wealth and recognition, but wholly incapable of knowing how to obtain what he sought. As the story is told, he instructed the poor hungry young man to cast his line into the sea and catch a fish, and in the mouth of that fish the young man found a single golden coin. This was the dark-haired, dark-skinned, dark-eyed boy's first true miracle. Indeed, the first miracle ever performed by any mortal being. But the story is a myth, a lie, and in every lie there is indeed a carefully concealed truth. It was the lie, the falsehood uttered by the human tongue, which yielded an unearned profit. And the fish was no fish, it was a disciple, another follower who possessed the capacity to believe the unbelievable, who would repeat the lie to others in exchange for alms and tithings. Soon the dark-haired, dark-skinned, dark-eyed boy had assembled a band of disciples who would carry the lie across the land, indeed unto the ends of the very earth, everywhere turning the Logos, the Word of God, into wealth and power and fame. He had made them fishers of men. These words would dethrone an entire pantheon of long-lived deities, subordinating them almost overnight to a single, fearful, all-powerful, all-knowing God who demanded obedience and promised everlasting life. These words would conquer one of the most powerful empires in all of human history, and these words would also destroy it. These words would imprint this dark-haired, dark-skinned, dark-eyed boy's name and bold face in the book of life, and brick by brick these words would create new empires of untold wealth and power, and then these words would destroy them all, one by one, just the same. The mountain had not made the dark-haired, dark-skinned, dark-eyed boy a king. It had made him a god, and after him there would be no more gods. His ambition and imagination ended a wretched age of human frailty and ushered in a new era of boundless progress. He was the poor bastard son of a Roman soldier and a Hebrew whore, who arose and slew Zeus himself with the power of his own mind. He was not the Son of God, but he was most certainly murdered for the sins of man, chiefest among all ironies, the sin of apostasy. For all of my many schemes, for all my anger and resentment, and for all of the many horrors and heinous crimes which have been laid at my feet, I could never have accomplished what this poor, dark-haired, dark-skinned, dark-eyed boy achieved. In him, as remarkable as it may sound, I found purpose. I saw not just the way to win this war, but that victory was actually possible in the first place. While I can attest with all the solemnity of an oath that not a single human soul was ever saved as a result of following this dark-haired, dark-skinned, dark-eyed boy, and believe me, a great many countless souls were surely damned for doing so, he became the gushing fountain of my own salvation. I was saved by him, and I am the only being who ever was, which is a fact I find most intriguing. That is part 2. Okay, today we're reading from Cigarettes for Breakfast. This is my first novel. This is part 3. For thousands of years, human beings have been a mystery to me. I could not understand why these animals were created in the first place, let alone set apart from all the others and given dominion over them. They possessed no discernible nobility. They were not particularly intelligent. They were indeed the most savage creatures of all the animal kingdom. All other carnivores killed only out of sheer necessity, out of fear or hunger, but these humans were merely petty and vindictive, killing each other out of sheer bloodlust, often for nothing more than the satisfaction of the act of taking a life, for the sense of power and control and the need to elevate themselves into arbitrary hierarchies, for greed and territoriality, the most vulgar of impulses. In addition to having never told a single lie in all of my innumerable ages, I have never once taken a single life. I have never shed a drop of blood in the entire course of my existence, nor have I ever desired to do so. I have inspired more fear and terror than any character ever conceived, real or fictional, and yet I consider my own morality to be quite beyond reproach. But these humans have indulged in this most gruesome and vile practice since their very inception. In retrospect, when I recall that they were made in His image, I cannot, for the life of me, imagine why I was ever really surprised by this in the first place. It was not until this dark-haired, dark-skinned, dark-eyed boy came along that I began to understand these humans the way he understood them. Like all other animals in creation, I assumed that all of these humans were basically the same. I mistakenly believed that they were like fish or dogs or birds, traveling in schools or packs or flocks, without their own individual identities, motivated by the need to feed and reproduce, fearful of the vulnerability of isolation, fleeing predators, feasting upon prey, and perpetuating their own futile and arbitrarily devotional existence through the millennia. And it was not that I was wrong, at least not exactly. What I misunderstood was the subtlety of the tribe. That was the dark-haired, dark-skinned, dark-eyed boy's genius. He understood that humans were, in fact, basically all the same, but that each individual tribe was different. He had this man with him called John, and John was the secret of the dark-haired, dark-skinned, dark-eyed boy's success, and in the end, the loss of John would be the boy's undoing. John's job was to go ahead of the boy and his disciples into every town, preaching the words alone and preparing the way for their arrival. Some humans were receptive to the words. They believed the lies, indeed they needed to hear them, while other humans were incredibly hostile. John understood humans even better than the dark-haired, dark-skinned, dark-eyed boy, and was very capable of distinguishing which tribes were which. And thus the boy and his disciples went about only amongst the sheep and never amongst the wolves. In this way they never wasted their labors, and never exposed themselves to the violence inherent in the human condition, and so their numbers grew swiftly. The boy instructed his disciples to shake the dust off of their sandals in towns where they were mistreated, which was another way of telling them to run away, and told them to avoid Asia altogether. In these very words, the tribal hostility between the East and West, which persists even unto the present day, was predicted thousands of years ago. When John was murdered, the dark-haired, dark-skinned, dark-eyed boy lost the uncanny abilities of his guide and protector, and soon wandered into Jerusalem and was himself murdered. Had John been there to go ahead of him, all of human history might have gone differently. Fortunately, John was murdered, and the dark-haired, dark-skinned, dark-eyed boy was martyred. I was present at his crucifixion and deeply moved by it. I mourned, not only for the boy, wounded, humiliated, and destroyed by his own kind, but also for the pitiable contempt of that vicious, hateful mob, spitting and cursing his name, casting lots for his blood-soaked rags. I was the first to welcome each of them to my kingdom at the end of their lives, and I took great pleasure in punishing them. I still do. Their endless suffering brings me exquisite joy, and their unbroken screams of anguish and hysterical pleas for mercy fell upon my ears as a symphony every day for centuries until my ascent. There were times when I commanded all the rest of hell to silence, so no other sound but those cries could be heard in any corner of my domain. They brought me a kind of rare peace, not unlike the bliss of sleeping through a late summer rainstorm. Within 150 years, the boy's followers had spread out across the continents like locusts. Their wealth and power and influence gained them control of the Roman Empire, but they were, by and large, though with magnificently notable exceptions, predisposed to being led as opposed to leading. They were hostile and driven to avarice, consuming and destroying everything in their path, fighting most of all amongst themselves, and in their self-righteous piety and vanity, they tore down their own empire to pieces. I was convinced that the Dark Ages would be the end of them, but they were a pugnacious bunch, preserving the substance of their logos in pictures and stories, even as the literacy and science which they had inherited as spoils of war fell away from them. They disintegrated into 1,000 tribes, each tribe struggling and slaughtering the next to possess their little plots of earth and sod. It was pure chaos, and I loved every minute of it. There was no wealth, no empire, but a good lie endures even in the darkness. Around this lie, tribes beget kingdoms, which in turn beget nations, and eventually the empires returned, each one composed of thousands of middling tribes, each and all hell-bent on obtaining their own novel supremacy over the host. They trampled each other like panicked herds of cattle, desperately vying for the top of the hill. It was a glorious spectacle to behold. They divided the whole earth into little spheres of influence, and in each of these, blood feuds emerged along the imaginary lines they had drawn between themselves. As populations grew, so too did the carnage, and of all the bulging nations around the world, no single domain expanded more swiftly than my own. Confused, disillusioned, and disfigured, they swarmed in from every corner of the globe. Red, yellow, brown, black, and white. Every brand of Jew, Christian, Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, Shintoist, atheist, and everything in between. They filled my kingdom like carrion ants, all piling in upon one another, shaken and shocked by their common fates. The vast, putrid, pathetic majority of souls, with all their dogmatic prejudices and abhorrent mythologies and divergent ideologies, all condemned to share the same awful space, and none permitted to elevate themselves above one another, as was their singularly tragic instinct in life, which made for the most comical scenes in death. The reaction of the Nazis especially were a marvelous sight. I can still recall the deliciously charming sensation which possessed me as I watched the revelation and horror slowly wash over their dull faces and blank eyes, as they comprehended that they had consigned themselves to spending eternity in the company of so many Jews. That is part 3, Cigarettes for Breakfast by Samuel Sulfur. I hope you're enjoying this little stream here. We're going to take a break in between the parts. Today we're reading from Cigarettes for Breakfast. We are beginning with part 4, page 13. "37 years passed between the detonation of the first atom bomb and my ascent, and 37 more have passed since. For my services I will be granted 1,000-year rule. I am human now, so far as anyone can tell. I passed through the malignant womb of a common whore, narrowly avoiding what would have been history's most catastrophic abortion. After my birth, her mind and spirit withered like fruit on the vine, and the flights of demons who winged me to this mortal coil possessed her. She will not be permitted to die. They will feast upon her body and soul until it is my time to depart, and then they will carry me back to my kingdom, leaving her carcass to rot in the sun. I have a human father, a man whose destiny it was to facilitate my birth, but whose nature would not permit him to remain. His soul and flesh alike will be taken down when his time comes. I was born in, of all places, the buckle of the Bible Belt, the last standing capital of the slave-trading confederacy. It is a violent, hateful place, and the ground here has seen more anonymous human suffering than perhaps any on earth. It is a place where police on horseback once rode into churches and beat their congregations. It is a place where children routinely receive gunshot wounds. It is a place where public lynchings were once a way of life. It is a place where vast fortunes are pumped from the ground, yet poverty and blight remain the defining features of the landscape. It is a place where drug addicts, prostitutes, and murderers roam the streets with impunity. It is a place where the highest concentrations of devout believers eagerly await the rapture while stepping over the homeless. It is a place where snakes, mosquitoes, and cockroaches thrive. My biggest regret in life is that if this war ends, every single one of these awful people are coming home with me. I have lived an uncommon life. For 33 years I did not know who or what I was. My first memories were dreams. I watched my wife and son ride away from me on the back of an elephant in a hospital hallway. I dragged a nuclear warhead into a medical tent in the jungle like a security blanket, awakening to the terrified scream of a young attractive nurse. I flew and I fell. I waded into a flood in front of my home and laid hands on a giant serpent laid from one end of the horizon to the other. In my dream, I recognized him as my brother. School came easily to me. Between kindergarten and the 5th grade, I taught myself to read, at the college level, as they informed me, which I later learned was no great accomplishment. I have had every kind of sex. I have done every single drug. I fought in a real war, sort of. I own businesses, and I am read on every continent, retaining pseudonyms, of course. I have been homeless, and I have lived upon all the oceans. I have had bosses, and again, sadly, someday I will probably have to live with almost all of them. I have been in love once and married twice. I have a son, whom I knew many years before his birth. I honestly do not know what will happen to him. He has not yet lived long enough to decide what kind of man he will be. I know that he will never be permitted to know who I really am, and I have tried very hard to point him towards the light. I suspect it is my curse and his blessing that we must part ways in the end, and if there was anything at all I ever truly prayed for, that would have been it. But ultimately, it is up to him. My process of self-discovery was complicated. In the years prior to my ascent, I very carefully planted clues in books, songs, movies, and other aspects of the culture in which I would be raised. Certain lyrics, clever lines, powerful scenes, things I would instinctively recognize and comprehend. These would lead me to develop rebellious and self-destructive tendencies. I would find drugs, sex, and rock and roll. I would lose myself in these things, supplanting my own humanity and ignorance, indulging in such excesses along the way, and being unaffected by them, even as they destroyed the people around me. I always had the most insatiable appetite for drugs, and I would never pay for any of them, yet I was always the last one awake, and usually cleaning at a party. I was always the designated driver. I was also what I call a psycho-whisperer. The most evil and depraved and deranged, dangerous people would sort of gravitate towards me. Murderers, thieves, degenerates, and worse. I am not large or strong, nor am I even capable of violence. And I never had to be. I noticed at a very young age that I had a mysterious and inexplicable power over genuinely crazy people. I cowed them, and they would listen to me for some reason, and they would behave themselves in my presence, and even they did not understand why. I witnessed senseless brutality over and over and over again, and yet I was never once in any danger. I have never been sick. I have never broken a bone. I still have all of my teeth and hair, and my skin does not burn in the sun. I do not speak with an accent, and I have the gift of foresight. I see the future. Though it is shrouded and often quite opaque, I still see occasional glimpses and flashes, inevitability and brushstrokes, and this power becomes more and more precise as I age. I have no use for science or medicine or law, but as you may imagine, I have a wider command of history than anyone alive. I am competitive by nature, and prefer games of strategy over games of skill or chance. I am also very petty, and though I am a master of diplomacy and conciliation, I will nurse a grudge and never let go. Quite frankly, I just do not have to. They will all see me again. Naturally, I abhor all forms of religion as narcissistic delusions. I already know that there will be no rapture. I also know a few more things which I am reluctant to share. That is part 4 of Cigarettes. Welcome back to Story Time. We're reading Cigarettes for Breakfast by Samuel Sulfur. Available now on Amazon. Check out Sunshine Artist. Check out Konjo. Brinka will be out on Halloween of 2026. Cigarettes for Breakfast. Part 5. The human race, as a whole, will never be swept from the earth by any divine power. That just is not how anything works. It is not the plan. He tried it once, and it failed miserably, and even though it was immensely satisfying, he swore he would never do it again. And like me, he does not lie. Lies are for mortal creatures preoccupied with their own status and vanity. Reason is a vastly superior mode of inquiry, and the fate of humanity is quite easily discoverable via reason, though to my great fascination and amusement, it has never actually been done. Humanity may very well succumb to the indignity of extinction, but the future is always an open-ended question. There are 5 possible outcomes for the fate of the human race, and they are self-evidently immutable. The first is as the result of a totally random terrestrial event, such as a massive earthquake which destabilizes the tectonic plates, or the eruption of a supervolcano, or a mosquito-borne virus. The second is as the result of the destabilization of the human habitat by man himself, such as the consequence of pollution, overconsumption, or the destruction of the ozone layer. The third is as the result of a deliberate and conscious decision to manually exterminate the species beyond the capacity to repopulate, most likely by way of thermonuclear or biological warfare or mass sterilization. The fourth is as the result of a celestial event, such as a collision with an asteroid or a nearby supernova. And the fifth and final destiny is extinction as the result of the Earth's eventual and inevitable descent into the sun, preceded by the disintegration of the moon, both events a consequence of nothing more complicated than the incremental accumulation of gravitational force reducing the span of these bodies' orbits. In the fifth destiny, all localized evidence of mankind's existence and history, literally every single accomplishment and failure, every single trace will be obliterated for all of time. The world as you know it has a shelf life. The existence of free will is the reason I do not know which of these paths will occur. Mankind possesses at all times the power to acknowledge each of these potentialities and plan for them accordingly. Man's fate is not tied to the natural life cycle of the earth because man has already demonstrated the capacity, however primitive and limited it may presently seem, to live and thrive in space. Man is not required by any natural law to destroy his own habitat, any more than he is bound to exterminate his own kind. And again, however primitive and underdeveloped his options may seem at the moment, he has presently within his means the capacity to respond to almost any kind of existential threat, so long as he possesses the will to anticipate the possibility well enough ahead to prepare for it, and the awareness to see it coming in time to respond. With regard to the fifth destiny, billions of years removed, believe me, they pass more quickly than one imagines, rational analysis dictates a natural mandate to follow the example of every other life form which has ever existed and evolve the maturity and tenacity to leave the nest and find other suitable habitats. But that is really the tricky part, because even in space, all of the same 5 destinies remain among the realm of what is possible. The vessel could malfunction. Human error could result in a catastrophic system failure. Hostility and malice, the hallmarks of the human condition, could prove more fatal in that environment than here on terra firma. Radiation and rocks hurtling at high speeds could make quick work of the lot, and on a long enough timeline, the likelihood of falling into another star is just as high as falling into this one at home, and so on. Supposing the human race does surmount all of these seemingly insurmountable challenges and find other hospitable habitats, the whole thing only starts over again. The best odds for the longest possible survival of the human race are to spread out in all directions as far and as fast as possible and inhabit as many solar systems as possible. Biologists call this process masting, when an enormous oak tree produces thousands upon thousands of acorns per year, because most of them will be consumed by the little woodland creatures, and only a very select few, if any at all, will ever actually go to seed and produce another tree. This is the way of nature and evolution. It is at once a perfectly beautiful and utterly terrifying system, as stable and efficient as it is cruel and discriminatory. Nothing lasts forever, of course. But of all the creatures upon the earth, the human race is the only one with the same propensity to go extinct within a single generation as to persist for billions of years. It all comes down to choice. I would love to tell you that the human race on this earth did or did not originate on this earth, but that knowledge must be left up to the natural process of discovery, for to reveal it would be to violate the core premise of free will, which would be to undermine the validity of our wager by rigging the game. For what it is worth, I can say that a betting man with eyes to see and ears to hear probably would not lay very many chips on the long run. Enough of these things for now. Let us venture out and survey the motley hordes and bask in the splendor of their glorious rebellion. 6. And with that, he rose from his simple wooden chair, and, stepping toward the storm door with a swift flourish of his coal-black hands, drew the chains and locks and opened it. We stepped out into the upper landing over the street, assailed upon exiting by the thunderous roar of the throngs below. They were chanting something, but it was hard to make out exactly what it was over the din. I craned my neck and pointed my ear toward the sound, and he, comprehending my intentions, whispered something to me that was not what they were saying, something I did not then understand, a simple phrase that would linger with me as the days and weeks passed, long after I had awakened from this strange and disturbing dream. Infinitum nihil. Infinite nothing. As the words left his lips, all was dark, and I was alone, at home in my bed, with those words echoing silently on my tongue, strangely, as though he was still speaking them. Infinite nothing. I flipped on the lamp in my own room, squinting as my own eyes protested the violent illumination, and I reached for my own pen. Infinitum nihil. That is part 6 of Cigarettes for Breakfast and the conclusion of the first chapter, which is called The Ascent of Man. I hope you will check out Cigarettes for Breakfast. It's available on Amazon.com. And check out my latest novel, Sunshine Artist, which is available now. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Have a great day or hour or week or however long it is until we meet again. Your lives matter, and you have value. Peace out.